For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Madam Speaker, I have a motion to recommit at the desk.
Is the gentleman opposed to the bill?
I am in its current form.
The gentleman qualifies. The clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Kelly of Pennsylvania moves to recommit the
Clerk
bill.
will suspend. What purpose does the gentleman from Connecticut
Madam
seek
Speaker,
recognition?
I reserve a point of order.
Point of order. Order is reserved. The clerk will report.
H.R. 1309 to the Committee on Education and Labor with instructions to report the same back to the House forthwith with the following amendment. Add at the end the following. Title III, Sense of Congress. Section 301, Sense of Congress. It is the sense of the Congress that the current House majority has failed to deliver results for the American people on critical issues facing our nation by prioritizing impeachment of the President over working with the administration and Republicans in Congress to enact policies such as the following. 1. An act implementing the United States-Mexico-Canada Trade Agreement. 2. The National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2020. 3. The Department of Defense Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2020. 4. Legislation to secure operational control of the southern border. 5. Bipartisan legislation to lower prescription drug prices.
The House will be in order. The gentleman deserves to be heard. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, as we get ready to leave the House today and go home for Thanksgiving, I think it's been alarming that as we read the newspapers, as we listen, we find that so many families are not going to be celebrating Thanksgiving together because of the political divide that's taking place not only here on the floor of the People's House, but in our homes. It is incredible to me that we have allowed our political rhetoric to divide not only Republicans and Democrats on the floor, but also our families back home. This has never happened before in the Speaker's house. We should never have this happening on the floor. Now, look, I know that we have differences of opinions. The relentless pursuit to delegitimize the election of Donald Trump has taken over any activity that should be taking place on the floor of the People's House. Madam Speaker, the House is not in order.
The House is not in order. Gentleman deserves to be heard. House is not in order. Members, gentleman can be recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As we stand here in the House, on the floor, the People's House, and we get ready to depart for Thanksgiving celebration, it's hard to imagine what it is that this majority has in mind when it comes to legislation, because we are not doing legislation. We have concentrated on impeachment. Madam Speaker, the House is not in order.
Gentleman is correct. Members take their conversations off the floor. Gentleman deserves to be heard for the few minutes left in his statement.
Now, I would ask all members to recommit. And recommit for the purposes that the American people elected us. To do legislation that makes sense. To do legislation that is long overdue. To do legislation that is critical. To do legislation that makes sense for every single American. I appeal to you not as a Republican, but as an American. Have we left this floor and decided that we can no longer work together because the American people are drawing that conclusion? And when I go home, they say to me, can't you all agree on anything? And I say, yes, we can, but Madam Speaker, floor is not in order.
The House is not in order. My good friends, please take your conversations off the floor. The gentleman deserves to finish.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We have wasted precious time and millions of hard-working American taxpayer dollars on a pursuit of an effort to impeach the President of the United States. We have done nothing to legislate and to act in the best interest of every American. I would ask again that we look at what we're doing as Americans and not as Republicans or Democrats, because the people back home can't understand why it is that they sent us here to do what we're not doing today. Why? Why are we not doing it? That is the choice that, Madam Speaker, the House is not in order. Thank you, Madam Speaker. At some point, I would hope and pray that the greatest nation the world has ever known, the defenders of liberty and freedom all over the world, could take a look and see what we're doing right now and ask, what is the message we are sending to the rest of the world? Really? America is caught up in an effort to impeach the duly elected President of the United States. And why? Because we have been so consumed with hate that we can no longer see straight. Look, why are we not passing the United States-Mexico-Canada trade agreement, which is a jobs bill? Why are we not passing the National Defense Authorization Act for the fiscal year 2020, which is critical to our safe building? Why are we not passing the Department of Defense Appropriations Act?
Ben.
You know what, Madam Speaker, I appreciate you saying it, but I'm going to ask my colleagues the same. Please extend to me the same respect that I am extending to you.
You're out of order. You direct your remarks to the chair.
I would,
continue
Madam Speaker,
your
but
remarks.
I don't think the other side is
you are
interested in hearing what I have to
recognized.
say.
You are recognized.
We also have not passed the Department of Defense Appropriation Act. Can you believe we are that irresponsible? Legislation to secure operational control of our southern border. We're not doing that. And we're not doing bipartisan legislation to lower prescription drug prices and handle surprise billings and pre-existing conditions. Why are we not doing those things that are the most important things to our citizens back home? I would ask that we look into what we are doing, and if we are doing it strictly for political purposes and in a power grab, that is not why the American people sent us here. That is not why the majority on the floor of the House changed during the last election. But now the people are seeing exactly what happens when the majority switches over. And when I go home, people ask me, why aren't you doing something about what's happening in Congress today? And I said, you know what? That was America's choice, not ours. When we
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman's time has expired.
Sincerely wish.
Gentleman from Connecticut.
I would like to sincerely wish.
The gentleman's time has expired. The House will come to order. Gentleman from Connecticut deserves to be heard. What purposes does the gentleman from Connecticut rise?
Madam Speaker, on behalf of America's nurses, doctors, and social workers who are begging for relief from unprecedented levels of workplace violence, I insist upon my point of order. The motion violates Clause 7 of Rule 16, the germaneness rule.
Does any member wish to be heard on the point of order? If not, the chair is prepared to rule. The gentleman from Connecticut makes a point of order that the instructions proposed in the motion to recommit offered by the gentleman from Pennsylvania are not germane. Is there of Rule 16, the germaneness rule provides that no proposition on a subject different from that under consideration shall be admitted under color of amendment. The bill addresses Department of Labor standards for workplace violence, prevention, and Medicare eligibility based on those standards. The instructions in the motion express the sense of Congress with respect to prioritization of certain legislative items. The amendment proposed in the motion to recommit addresses a different subject matter than the subject matter of workplace violence prevention as addressed by the underlying bill. Accordingly, the chair finds that the instructions propose an amendment that is not confined to the subject matter of the underlying bill. The amendment is non-germane and the point of order is sustained. Gentleman from Pennsylvania.